For the first part of Section 2, we looked at the reforms, the changes the National Assembly made to France once they got power. For the most part, the people supported the National Assembly. After all, they did a lot of good things. They gave freedom and equality to all those who had no voice or power before. When the king had all the power, they have equal justice, freedom of speech. These are the things that the Third Estate wanted, and that's why they rose up, so they get what they want. They also stripped the nobility, the wealthy, from control over the poor peasants. They no longer, the nobility no longer have the luxury of all the wealth and not having to pay any of the taxes. And the nobility is pretty much given no luxuries. They are stripped. They stripped the king, the most important figure of the French Revolution, from absolute power. He's no longer doesn't call all the shots. No longer has complete control over France. He can no longer live in even Versailles and spend enormous amounts of money with Marie Antoinette, or his sidekick, the Queen of France. So considering the French Revolution is looked at as a positive thing so far for the people, achieving the goals of the Republic for the people and by the people, why do I have this picture on the left? The picture is called Saturn Devouring His Sons by Francisco Goya, as a depiction of the French Revolution. It doesn't seem to make much sense at all. After all, the painting is dark, it's violent, it's filled with terror, it's filled with death, it's gruesome, it's even hard to look at. Well, this podcast is going to be looking at the radical change that takes place during the French Revolution. The revolution takes a bloody turn for the worst, which ends up making the revolution a failure in meeting any of their objectives. So this picture over here, this guy with the eating his son actually, is going to make some sense to how that is a characteristic, a metaphor of the French Revolution. All right, let's get into this. Two people you need to know in the factors in making the French Revolution turn dark. First is Robespierre. He's the leader of the Jacobins. The Jacobins are the political group that ends up gaining the National Assembly. The Jacobins are a radical group. They are calling for the king to die, the queen to die, and for drastic decisions. Robespierre at first wasn't very radical, but he starts to change his mind. And we'll look at all the policies he does. He ends up becoming the leader of the Jacobins, and he ends up becoming the leader of the National Assembly. Robespierre, very important figure. He is going to be the one that really takes the French Revolution down the road that looks like this. Okay? There's another guy who's also extremely violent, who's extremely radical, who is saying a lot of different things. This guy is Marat. He is a journalist. He is a leader of a newspaper. Marat is actually how you say his name. He's the editor of a newspaper that's calling for the death of everyone who supports the king and the queen. Anyone who's supporting the First and the Second Estate, even people that are part of that first, the clergy and the Second Estate, the nobility. Basically anyone that would complain or question the National Assembly, Marat's saying they gotta go. They gotta die. You see the contradictions from what was previously said in the last podcast with the Declaration of Rights of Man. Marat's saying, yeah, the Declaration of Rights of Man, that's a good thing. But right now we got enemies, and we need to take care of those enemies first. By this time, a little side note, the National Assembly, when the Jacobins gained power under Robespierre, they're called the National Convention. The National Convention is not much different than the National Assembly. They just change their name. So I will be calling the National Assembly now the National Convention. Pretty much the same thing. Don't want to confuse you on that. Robespierre, originally against the death penalty, now he's for it. And he's for a new device that is all about what the National Convention is going to use in the deaths of traitors, the deaths of their enemies, and that is the guillotine. The guillotine was used as an efficient, democratic, humane, at least what they called, way of killing people. It was equality in death, the National Convention under Robespierre said. Everyone dies equally. We're for equality, Robespierre said, so let's have him die equally. This is a person's head. He shouldn't be smiling. He's nervous. And the blade comes down, chops his head off, and he's dead. She's dead. So there it is, guillotine. Robespierre and Marat are calling for two specific people's heads to be chopped off. The first is King Louis XVI. Louis XVI, this picture is depicting his death. He does have his head chopped off. Robespierre led the National Convention to put Louis XVI on trial for treason, for going against the government, for deserting his nation. And out of 749 members of the National Convention, 639 convict him. He is killed. Marie Antoinette is terrified of this. They meet one last time. His daughter Marie Theresa howls frantically. Louis does break down. He tried to keep a straight face and said, "Be strong, be strong." When his daughter faints, it's nothing he can do to bring himself composure. He falls apart. He cries. This is the last time his family sees him. His head is chopped off. Louis's head is shown to the French people. The French people are cheering. They're dipping their handkerchiefs, their pikes, envelopes, fingers, anything they can to get a piece of the king's blood from his head. So people are storming it, wanting to get his blood. They say that they slapped his face around, and people were so excited. And Marie Antoinette comes next. Marie Antoinette was on trial again for treason. She was sentenced to death. She, however, her death is more than King Louis XVI. It's more intense. Her hair's cut, and she is given common clothing. She is paraded down an open carriage for a half a mile before she gets to the guillotine, where people are throwing fruit, rotten fruit at her, rotten food, and they are cursing at her. So the king and queen are dead. They said, Robespierre and the Jacobins said, the king and the queen must die. You can't have this revolution while you have a king. So things are supposed to be good. King and queen are gone. No more threats. National Assembly National Convention can calm down. Not so. Robespierre gets even more paranoid. He thinks everyone is out to get him, and he institutes the darkest part of the French Revolution, the most important term. It's called the Reign of Terror. The darkness and the violence of the French Revolution really kicks in when Robespierre takes most power of the National Convention. He basically, under this Reign of Terror, becomes the king, the dictator. He has all the power, and Marat's okay with that because he's doing everything Marat wants to do. Bread prices are still going up, though. People are starving. The French were divided on how to run the country. Great Britain, Holland, and Spain joined the war against France, along with Austria and Prussia. So everyone in Europe is attacking France. The National Convention says, you must fight for this country. Peasants are saying, I got a farm, I can't go off and fight. Peasants are killed for refusing to fight. This angers many people. There are many enemies of the National Convention now because the National Convention is not giving the people the things that they promised. No more freedom of speech, no more freedom of press. You must fight for this country, the National Convention is saying. And the bread prices are still going up. Things haven't gotten any better. And Robespierre, because of this, became convinced that there were spies and there was enemies all over France, and he wanted them dead. So here's some things that he would kill you for. Anything you could be suspect for being killed for. Saying something nice about the king, dead. Saying something nice about the Catholic Church, he wanted to go after the Catholic Church, dead. Complain about the price of bread, dead. Complain about anything the National Convention does, dead. Not doing enough nice things, dead. Simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time, dead. If you didn't like your neighbor, you could say your neighbor said something mean about Robespierre. Robespierre would say, okay, they're dead. There was no juries, there was no trials. You were on the list, you were killed. Whew, lots of stuff, gotta go fast. A woman living outside of Paris, her name is Charlotte Corday, she said enough was enough, and she was here, right here. She ends up killing Marat. You can see the spike going through Marat's chest. She came in and told Marat that she had a list of traitors. Marat said, give me that list, I'll have them killed. Charlotte Corday ended up killing Marat. Charlotte Corday said, I have done my duty, let them do theirs. I have killed one man to save 100,000. She is eventually guillotined. The violence does not stop with the death of Marat, though. Robespierre continues his reign of terror. He goes into a town called Vendée. It's basically a genocide. The Vendée was a town that rose up and said, we're not following the National Convention. Robespierre and the National Convention said, yes, you are. 200,000 victims were killed. One of the members of the National Convention told the general, kill them all, both sexes, burn everything. Women were raped hundreds of times by the soldiers sent in by the National Convention. Generals were told, if you don't kill all these people, you're going to be killed. You're going to get your head chopped off. And that was in the region called Vendée, and you can see this image showing that violence. The National Convention is going nuts. Traitors are put on boats and they're being sunk. Here's a picture of all these heads, the terror and the horror of the French Revolution under Robespierre. Robespierre not only kills anyone who goes out against him, he kills the rebels. He also de-Christianizes France. He says no more Christianity in France. The old ways are done, the new ways are in. Notre Dame, little side note, very pretty cathedral, was almost dynamited. Yet they needed the dynamite to fight the wars against Austria, Prussia, and England. But they were about to blow up this cathedral. Cathedrals were blown up. Priests were rounded up and killed. It was an intense time period in the French Revolution. Here's a quote from The Terror, The Shadow of a Guillotine, the book I read. Priests were hunted down, churches defiled, altar pieces slashed, stained glass windows were mutilated. Robespierre went after anyone. And this is all during the part, even when Marat's done. So you have Robespierre leading this cause of anyone he sees as a threat, he goes after. And England is making fun of France because of this. He's saying, look at these French people. They're drunk on blood. They're killing all these people. Not a good image of what the French Revolution has become. Robespierre even says, worship me. He starts this religion called the Cult of the Supreme Being. He said, worship reason, worship man. Don't worship Christianity. He actually made weeks become 10-day weeks because then people wouldn't know what day was Sunday. Crazy stuff going on. People of France, the National Convention say, enough is enough. We got to stop this. Robespierre came into the National Convention and said, I have a list of traitors in this National Convention. I'm not going to give anyone a list. So everyone believes they're suspect. Everyone believes in the National Convention. I'm going to be next because Robespierre is cutting heads off left and right. So one person stands up. He's the hero of the day. He says, Robespierre, you're next. You're going to be the one cut off. Your head's going to be cut off because you're the traitor. You're just killing anyone. You're paranoid. You're killing anyone that you think's out to get you. And that's it. We're done with you. So the National Convention rises up. Totally surprised. Robespierre did not predict this. Robespierre ends up getting his due. He gets his head cut off. Why did all this happen? What does this have to do with this picture right here? Where this is a Greek god, Saturn. I believe it's Greek. It's called Saturn the Varinous Sun by Francisco Goya, I said. This is the image of the Greek god believes his sons, when they get old, will rise up and overthrow him in power, so he ends up killing his own people. That is what the French Revolution ended up becoming. Robespierre came in to raise the French people under the National Convention to give them these freedoms that did not happen, that ended up being a failure, and he thought the people that he was supposed to support ended up becoming his enemy because he thought that they were going to overthrow him, so he ends up killing his own people. French Revolution, very violent, very horrific, all because of Robespierre leading the French Republic into this reign of terror. But the French Revolution ends with his death.